Welcome to the Vegas Player Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Ciccatelli, alongside Jimmy Naples. We are the Steel Valley Syndicate, and we're joined by, of course, your other host of the show, legendary musician and storyteller from Crime Town to Sin City, the Vegas Player himself, Jimmy Mulidore. Jimmy, how you doing?
Great, Johnny. Nice to see you and Jimmy. I'm
Nice to
very
see you.
proud of you guys for creating this show.
Well, thank you, Jimmy, and thanks for letting us start this show. And for the audience out there, we are coming to you live from Youngstown, Ohio, aka Crime Town, USA, downtown Youngstown. Jimmy's coming to you from Sin City, Las Vegas. Weather looks nice out there, Jimmy. It's nice and bright.
Oh, it's nice. Really, really beautiful time of the year here.
That's great. We hope to come out there and visit you soon. We got our winters coming up here, Jim. And
yeah, I know. I can't stand the winters in
I don't
Youngstown
envy
anymore.
those winters.
Yeah, it's gonna get brutal. It was the other day. It was 30 degrees in the morning and
God.
70 degrees in the afternoon. So
Wow.
those are the kind of swings we're hitting right now. But I just want to welcome everybody in for the show. Tell you what this is, the Vegas Player. That name comes from Jimmy's book. Actually, it's right here. It's available now. It's called The Vegas Player. Celebrities, sex, drugs, mafia, jazz swinger, Jimmy Mulidore. What a life you've lived, Jimmy. What a life you've lived. I can't wait to get into this with you. Just setting up what the show is going to be for folks. Every week we'll sit down with Jimmy. We'll talk about what's going on, out there from Youngstown to Las Vegas, everything in between. We'll talk about stories from his life, from his book. For anyone who doesn't know, Jimmy's a legendary musician. We'll get into that a little bit later, but Jimmy, what do you hope to get out of this podcast?
Well, I'd like to be a little more, get to be known in Youngstown again, and maybe, hopefully, brought back there to appear maybe in Stanbaugh Auditorium. Let the people know all of my past history with my neighbors, which Jimmy next to you is related to, and what beautiful people they were. They were not monsters. And maybe get my book known to a lot of people. And of course, I had such an incredible career. I'd like people to know about it.
Yeah, if you haven't read the book, folks, again, it's called The Vegas Player. It details all these stories that are amazing, really detailed. You'll recognize a lot of names in this book. There's a lot of times where you'll just be kind of shaking your head, thinking, holy cow, I can't believe the life this guy's lived. But from Youngstown to Vegas, and as Jimmy mentioned, the man sitting to my right here, Mr. James Naples the third, Jimmy Naples. Tell us about your family, for anybody who's not aware who you are.
Well, I am I'm the great nephew of Joey Naples, little Joey. Of course, great nephew to Sandy and Billy as well. My grandfather was Jinx. That most people knew him by Jinx. Real name was James, and of course. And they grew up down at Briar Hill, Calvin and Poplar. The house where they live at is no longer there, but we still go down every year for the Briar Hill Italian Fest, and kind of, in honor of those guys. I remember growing up as a kid, my grandfather, we used to go down to Sparkles, and we used to pick up all the stuff for the church for St. Anthony's to make the pizzas on Friday. And we'd pick that stuff up in the morning, and we'd go deliver it down there. And then we'd go to lunch up at Station Square. And my grandfather used to have lunch with Judge Leskavansky every week. And didn't figure out what that was all about until I got a little bit older and figured out that's probably how they were taking care of the judges. But hey,
And for anybody maybe not from Youngstown or who's not in the know, Jimmy's being humble here. The Naples family are legendary names in the Youngstown underworld. The organized crime, the La Cosa Nostra, the Naples brothers are some of the bigger names to ever come out of this town, as far as that side of it goes. So when he mentions Sandy and Billy and little Joey, these are big names, big names in Youngstown's history.
Yeah, they Sandy goes all the way back into the the 20s and 30s, and all the way up in through 60 when he got killed. And then Billy, of course, died a few years after that. And then, of course, Joey took over, and Joey basically, ran the family's operations for another 30 years. So they were legends in this town. It's, I mean, there's people that still remember him to this day,
We're joined by one of them.
And we are joined by one of them. Hey, Jimmy, tell us what it was like, growing up in Briar Hill and, growing up around, the Naples brothers and that. Tell us what it was like for you.
Well, to be very honest, Jimmy, the Naples family, which lived next door to my grandfather Mulidore family on 185 Poplar Street, I was closer to them than I really was to my own family. Sandy was like a big brother to me. I started out washing his car, and nobody could wash his car like me, so he grew to really like me. For what? I mean, he had that big black Cadillac that, my God, in the in the 50s, and my God, I washed that car with like a jewel. I'd spend an hour and a half washing that car. And I think I can't remember what he gave me, but it was much more than I really deserved. Sandy was like very generous, and it got to the.
I've heard that a lot, Jimmy. That he was a very generous guy. I was born in '78, so I never got the pleasure to meet him. So when I get to hear stories about him and Billy, it kind of tugs on my heartstrings because I didn't get a chance to meet those people. So I kind of live those memories of those guys through other people when they tell me about them. So I just want to let you know, this is very special to me.
Well, and that's why I'm telling you, because I know what it means to you, and what it really actually deep down means to me is I'm trying to let the people know the Naples family were beautiful. There was a side to them that cannot be equal. I can go to them for anything. And believe it or not, they would rise to the occasion, do anything for me, especially Sandy. I called Sandy at many times while I lived in Vegas to do me special favors, and not once would he ever say no. Sandy was like a big brother to me. He loved my family, and basically they were grooming me to be one of them, whatever that means to other people. I know what it meant, because after like my early childhood years and adolescent years, they were groomed. They loved me like just like their own family. And as in the movie, the old Bronx Tale, my dad bought me a saxophone when I was 8 years old. Took him 6 years to pay for it, $386. And he told me that if you don't learn how to play this, I'll break your effing arms. And I didn't know what they meant, but I loved to play the saxophone. So as I grew into my years of playing 5, 6 hours a day, because I knew that his family would ridicule him for spending that kind of money on an instrument, which they did tell him he's not going to go anywhere with that. Like everybody quits playing. So he in turn, as I turned 14, 15, or 16, he walked over and talked to, I guess I wasn't there, but he told me later, talk to Sandy. And he said, Sandy, don't encourage him to be with you guys because I want him to be a musician, as in the Bronx Tale with De Niro and Chaz Palminteri. And I guess it took a little bit of, hopefully, guts on my dad's part. My dad was not a wimp. He's a tough guy. But again, living next door to the Naples family was an honor. We never realized that at that time. I mean, Sandy, Billy, and Joey, I have here, there's a picture of Billy. Look at Billy right in the middle. I don't know if you can see it. But there it is, Billy, and some of the childhood people we grew up with. And it's I was honored my growing up period in Briar Hill, unlike any place in the world. And again, Sandy honored him by not encouraging me to be one of them. Now, I was trusted before that. Sandy would leave an envelope in the front seat of the Cadillac as I washed it. And every week, detective would drive up on Calvin Street, and Sandy had his Cadillac parked adjacent to that. And he said, take this envelope when they come up every Thursday and give them the envelope, which I think had $2,000 or $3,000 payoff money to the detectives, and they leave him alone. That's how powerful Sandy was. And that was the beginning of my kind of more involvement with the Naples family.
Real quick, what year are we talking?
Oh, gosh. Early 50s, late 49, 50s. I probably was between, I started with Sandy when I was 10, and I hung out with him until I was 14 or 15. So that's my time with Sandy. And along the way, Billy and Joey were close also. Billy, at one time, we got real close. And then one time, he found out I was hanging out with one of his girlfriends. And I was playing at a club called the 88 Keys in Warren, Ohio. And Billy was a girl named Rebecca, very beautiful girl there. And of course, I'm playing saxophone, and I'm like a cocky kid, and I started hanging out with her. And then he found out about it, and in his own way, we don't need to say what he did. He got angry at me, and he said, I mean, it's like he really liked the girl, and I didn't know he was going with her. God, I would never have even approached her if I knew that, but I didn't know that. And then he got me in the car one night, and he did what he did. We don't need to talk about what he did, but it's in my book. But he got very angry with me, and I promised him I had to lie. I said I'm not seeing her, which was a lie. I mean, because I know Billy was nuts, and I had to back off of that, and then we became close again. And case in point is when I told him I'm moving out to Vegas. He said, let me make a few calls. So he called the Teamsters Union here in Las Vegas to try to get me a card, which had no effect for the Musicians Union. But he thought that might be able to get me into the union without having a waiting period. But it had no effect on him because they're totally two different unions. But that's how kind of guy Billy was. And when he got assassinated, I was terribly upset. And actually all three of them, when Sandy got hurt, man, that took a chunk of my heart out. And then of course with Joey and I were almost the same age, and Joey was, we were like more like brothers, let's say it. And I'd go back. I think he had moved from Briar Hill to Crandall Avenue, somewhere near Henry Stanball Golf Course. And he was walking down the street, and I pulled up out of the car, and he was walking with his wife then. And I got out of the car, and he recognized, we give a big hug and so on. And at that time, he says, I'd like to get you involved with a singer that we have out of Indiana. And I said, Joey, I can't. He said, let me tell you about it. And he said, this kid's going to be a star. I said, why? I'm running 6 hotels. I said, at that time, I'm making $250,000 a year. That's a lot of money, and I don't have all that money anymore because of divorces and family robbery, and families robbing me and so on and so forth. But He said, this kid's going to be a star. And I said, Joe, I can't do it. He says, let me tell you. I said, no, I can't do it. I can't give up. I'm very tight with Baron Hilton at the Hilton. I got the Flamingo. I have the Stardust through Herb Tolman. And I have the Union Plaza through people. And I have the Claridge in Atlantic City, which I never been there. What I have the music department. I don't have the hotel. And I'm running bands through it. And, you know, when you run bands, you make a lot of money. I had the Jimmy Mulidore Hilton strings at the Hilton. And of course, I had the big orchestra for Elvis Presley and Barbra Streisand and everybody coming into the Hilton. And I said, I can't give that up. He said, well, I'm telling you. Anyway, the singer turned out to be Michael Jackson. And Frank DeLeo was handling him, and Joey had him in his pocket. So there you go. That's the kind of guy Joey Naples was. And when he got assassinated, I mean, these are like people, more than just people. They're like my family, and I love them so much. I mean, they were. I mean, after they were gone, it's like I didn't have anybody to count on, as far as somebody I can count on for anything, and I couldn't count on them for anything. So God bless the Naples family.
Real quick, Jimmy, you mentioned, you know, growing up in Briar Hill. Explain to folks who again, maybe you're watching this that aren't from Youngstown. Explain Briar Hill for everybody.
Briar Hill is unlike any place in the world, I guess. There's a certain closeness with like Gino Martorelli, a goofy character, Carl Ladon. The KO's bar, I understand, is still there through Gene Martorelli told me it's still there. And where we used to walk, when you mentioned the weather in Youngstown in January, February, we had to walk to where the church is now, I guess, up above there. We had to walk all the way up to Belmont Avenue in a foot of snow through that field to go to school through Crandall Avenue. But every family knew each other. It was like just a closeness that you never find in Briar Hill. In Poplar Avenue, there was right across from the Naples family was a store called, funny name, Ran Dan. He had a grocery store right across from the Naples. And you didn't have to go far. Walk across the street, and there it is. Meats, great meats, vegetables, everything. And it was below his house. He had built above the grocery store. And then next to that, Pab Naples, 2 doors down, had a grocery store. So think about that. Right on a little skinny street on Poplar was 2 grocery stores. I mean, how can that be? And here we are playing football on Poplar Avenue with every kid in the block, and just then I became more involved with my music, but still my mother taking me down from Calvin Street, walking down all the way down to Federal Street, where the old St. Anthony's Church was. I don't know if you even know where that's at now. It was right on the bottom of Federal Street there. And my mother would walk in the snow carrying my big tenor saxophone for my lessons. Here's a little woman, 4'7", 4'8", carrying my tenor saxophone down to catch the bus. I mean, goodness gracious. And we'd go late at night freezing, walking up there in the snow, up and down that street, and catch this. I even remember the name of the bus, 17 Mosier, wherever that name came from. Catching that bus, going down to Wick Avenue, and then walking up Wick Avenue to Strauss Hirschberg's music store to take a lesson from Al Calvert, Calderon. So Briar Hill was in my heart all the time.
For people who aren't aware, you know, I always get this a lot. I lived in Los Angeles for a long time and got friends from all over the country. And whenever we talk about Youngstown, you know, they're always kind of surprised at how big of an Italian population is in Ohio. They don't get it. They always confuse Ohio and Iowa, I think. And for the folks that have never been there. So, I always tell them, there's almost everybody in Youngstown is part Italian, because there was such a huge Italian population from Briar Hill and all the surrounding areas. And it's just to this day, I seriously, everybody here, I swear, has some Italian in their family, even.
Well, what's funny too, though, and he brought it up when he talked about Briar Hill. Even though those families still aren't living in that community, right? We get together at the Briar Hill Italian Fest, and it's like we went back 60 years. It's you're all family again, and I think that says a lot about your generation and your parents' generation of how they raise their families.
That area will never be duplicated for me. And of all things, my house got burned down that I lived on 349 Calvin Street. And you got to suspect
a lot of those got burnt down. I think there was somebody that was going through there that was torching them, I think.
Well, that's it's famous for collecting insurance money.
Mm-hmm.
Burn down a place, not to name names, but my relatives that own clubs like that. I mean, come on. I came back and appeared at one of my relatives' clubs, and he said, "You better not take any pictures off the wall that you sent me from all famous people." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I'm burning the place down tonight." And I'm going, "Well, you got to be kidding!" And there it was. I mean, this is what they did for the insurance money, and I would suspect that's what happened with my house. I wish it was still there because I would love to go back and walk in my house and see where I spent hours and hours and hours. No air conditioning, no heating, up in a third floor of a 27-room house, yellow brick building. And it's no longer there. That's where they park the cars to go over to KO's bar now. So Briar Hill remains in my heart forever. And I've come back there quite a few times, but now I guess it's totally different. The one thing I did love about Briar Hill was people would walk over your house and bring food, knock on the door and bring some pizza, bring some soup, bring some galumpkis, bring some calamari. I mean, you walk in and boom, here they come and bringing food. I mean, they don't exist out here. You don't even know who's living next door to you. I mean, and they say in the town, Trump American over here. I mean, they don't even know how to count to 10 over here when it comes to being neighbors around compared to, I mean, there's a difference. And I've been out here since 57, but it doesn't compare to Youngstown. So I hope I answered you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about that a little bit. The book's not called The Youngstown Player. It's called The Vegas Player. So you spent majority of your life now in Las Vegas. So, right. Tell us about your transition to Las Vegas. And, when did you move? What motivated that move? And, to get out of, I know you went to New York for a bit before, but, right. tell us about moving to Las Vegas.
Well, I was in New York and I met a lot of people, played with a lot of great jazz artists that eventually came through Las Vegas. I mean, famous jazz musicians, Miles Davis, Phil Woods. These are names you wouldn't recognize. Maybe Miles would.
Oh, yeah, we know Miles Davis.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows Miles, the most successful trumpeter. But I got to the point where I fell in love with a girl in Youngstown called Barbara Santucci. And I went back there and didn't work out. So I told my dad, I said, I met a trombone player and we were on the road a lot when I was in New York. We go to Junior's Bar and Grill and they have weekend bands like Tommy Dorsey, Jimmy Dorsey, which I played with, Buddy Morrow, Woody Herman, weekend bands that would go out different parts of United States just for the weekend. So I met this trombone player that had a rented house in Las Vegas. And he told me, he said, why don't you come out to Vegas? They're paying pretty good money working in shows. I said, how much? $135 a week. This is in 1957. So I came back and I told my dad, I said, I'm going to move out to Vegas. I said, he said, well, I don't have any money. I said, how much money you got? He said, I'll give you $40. So here I am. I got my uncle to drive me out in an old Chevrolet. Took 3-4 days to get there. The most miserable trip I ever had in my life. I swear I never do it again. And I had $40 in my pocket. And one of the all-time great bass players that was on the Buddy Morrow band came out. Scott LaFaro was his name. We went into a jazz club called the Black Magic. Now, that was the hot spot after hours, and every major entertainer in Las Vegas would go there after hours to have a drink and maybe sit in, do something, have some fun. And everybody, Billy Eckstein, Sammy Davis, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, people like that were there. Now, going in there, you were the star. Me, if you got to set in. I got to set in with Scott LaFaro. And they had some all-time great soloists. Carl Fontana were there. We started to play, and we played, because we were on the road with Chet Baker before, and we played and impressed the audience so much that a little saxophone player came up to me. He said, are you available to work? And I'm looking at him and said, available to work? I got $40 in my pocket. I'm going to stay with this trombone player that I met in New York, $10 a week. I'm only good for 4 weeks. And he said, well, would you like to work in the Sands Lounge with Red Norval, one of the world's biggest, I'll have to say, biggest pricks in the world. Tough guy, Red Norval. He had a face bigger than a watermelon. He was about 6'4". I said, yeah, I'd love that. So the next night, he went to the Air Force for 12 weeks, and I walk into the Sands Lounge. Here's Elizabeth Taylor, Eddie Fisher, Leo DeRocher, Humphrey Bogart, Edward G. Robinson, Rosalind Russell, Marilyn Monroe. They're all over there in the sand. I said, man, I came off the road. I had $40 in my pocket. Now I'm in the lounge with Frank Sinatra. And of all things, he didn't have much hair at that time. And he would appear in the showroom. And when he come into the lounge, like at 2 a.m. in the morning to hang out with all of his cronies from Hollywood, he'd take his rug off. So he's sitting there with his rug off and having drinks and carry on. And they come up and sit in and sing a song or two with us, because he's the one that booked this Red Norval. And I'm going, I can't believe this. I'm from nowhere. All of a sudden, I'm over there with these people, with this Mama Luke Red Norval, who the most miserable guy that ever lived. And I'm going, this guy, I walked in to give you an idea. I said, do you have any music, Mr. Norval? He said, yeah, I got music. And he threw it on the floor. I said, don't you have a music stand? He said, no, read it off the floor. Oh, I said, I'm in trouble with this guy here. Because, my background being from Ohio, I'm ready to knock him out. And I'm going, I better be careful here, because I got $40 in my pocket and I don't want to lose the job. Here I am. And all of a sudden, from one night to the next night, I'm in with all of the Hollywood crowd. Not in with them, but I'm playing for them. So that's my beginning of Las Vegas. And I was there.
How old were you?
19. Wow. I got there September of 1957.
Wow.
Imagine that. And, awesome. And of course, I scored like crazy. I got a lot of broads out of there, and it sounds kind of. I'm not a braggadocio kind of guy, but I just call a spade a spade. I can't lie. I just tell you. You asked me to tell you about my life. I had every broad in the world over there. Because I'm playing with Red Norval and Sinatra and broads all over the place, and I'm scoring like anything I want.
Fantastic. I love it. Hey, that's an Italian thing, because let me tell you something. You were talking about Billy's girl from the 88 Keys, right?
Yeah, the 88 Keys.
I come to find out Billy had like 3 or 4 kids with other women, and they've actually contacted me.
You got to be kidding. Oh my
on
goodness.
Facebook. Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love it.
For anybody who doesn't know, too, by the way, we run a Facebook mob or a group called Youngstown Mob on Facebook. So if you're watching this on YouTube, check us out on Facebook. Join the group Youngstown Mob. There's a lot of stories being shared on there. Gosh, there's over 26,000 people on there now.
Yeah, we got some great mob associates on there that post some fantastic stuff, family photos, FBI documents, court documents, all that kind of stuff. But they brings back a lot of memories, for a lot of people when we, see a lot of this stuff on there. And hey, Jimmy, if you get a chance to check it out later on today, I'll go on to the Youngstown Mob group and I'll post an old family photo that I have of the Naples family. And it's when Sandy was maybe 16 or 17.
Oh my goodness. Oh God. I mean, when as soon as you say the Naples family, my heart goes up because I'm not very close to my father's side of the family. They were, I hate to say it, rotten. I don't have anything to do with them. But the Naples family were more like my family than my father's side of the family, and that means a lot to me. I can't wait to see that photo, Jimmy.
Yeah, I'll post it. I'll tag you this way so you don't miss it.
Jimmy just teased a little bit about his love life and some of the escapades from his love life that are in this book, The Vegas Player. Check this book out if you guys can. Where can they check it out on Amazon, Jimmy?
You can get it through jimmymulidore.com, and my company will send you the book for I think it's $30 plus shipping charges. But jimmymulidore.com, you can get it.
There's so many great stories in that book, and like I said, for anybody who reads it, you're gonna recognize some names, some actresses, and you're gonna recognize a lot of names in this book. So definitely check it out. We'll get to some of these stories as we do more of these shows, the Vegas Player podcast. As we kind of wrap up today's episode, again, we'll get into more of his Jimmy's musical career. He mentioned some of the amazing musicians that he's played with over the years. Jimmy's a legendary jazz saxophonist. He also plays the English horn. I should say plays the English horn, the flute, right, the clarinet, the bassoon. I've got 3 boys myself. My oldest, he's in band. They're making him take a band class at school, so he had to pick an instrument. He just picked the flute. So he just got his first flute, Jimmy. So he's trying. We'll see. I don't know if I'm gonna give him the same strict kind of warning that your dad gave you. I'm not gonna tell him I'm gonna break his arms if he doesn't play, but we'll see if he likes it. But
well, that's that old school Italian. My dad was he was tough growing up right next to the Naples. You don't get any tougher than that. And my dog's barking. Get out of here. And
what's your dog's name?
Magic.
Magic. I love it.
Hey Jimmy, you remember Sandy's dad, Joe? Old man Joe?
Yeah.
Sandy's dad.
Right.
Yeah, my dad was telling me a story. He said when they used to go over there when they were little, he was kind of going blind and stuff, and he had the cane. And he said they used to call him Joe Dick because he was such a dick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because he would
Dick was a mean
people with that thing.
He didn't like anybody. Now his wife, your great grandmother, she was nice. Joe Dick hated everybody. And my grandfather, my baseball Jim, if you look him up, he was a legend in Youngstown because he was a big football and baseball guy. But he got the name of Baseball Jim Mulidore. He had all of the winning baseball teams back there, and he was tough as nails. He was tougher than my father. My father was tough. But he and Joe Dick, somehow they got along because they were both mean Italians. I mean, you can't get any meaner. My grandfather, actually, in the Briar Hill steel mill, if I got time, do I have time, Johnny?
Yeah. Go ahead.
My grandfather, Baseball Jim, it's in my book. when he was working there was a big black guy about 6'5". The story was told to me by my grandfather. He didn't like my grandfather, and he kept calling him Greasy Dago. And my grandfather's 5'10", wide, tough guy, but this guy's 6'5". And every night he just ridiculed him, put him down because he was from Italy. And at that time, Italians were not any recognition as far as comparable maybe to blacks when they were coming up. The Italians weren't recognized at like we are today. And it got to the point where he got my grandfather so angry. So my grandfather told him in his broken English, if you don't stop leaving me alone, I'm going to hurt you, you son of a bitch. Anyway, in the steel ore, the guy, he went up to the guy, and somehow they told me he threw him into the iron ore thing where they're making steel. He picked him up on a chest and threw him in the thing and killed him.
Holy
and about
cow.
several guys saw that happen. Nobody would say a word. And so rumor got out. I guess the police came over right next door on next to the Naples there. It must have been 10 of them. And he fought them off with a baseball bat right down. You know, in those days, the door you open up and you're right on the street. Because you lived in a cellar. You didn't upstairs were like, boy, you had to be honored to go. I wasn't allowed to go up my grandfather's upstairs. But you know, you open up the door and you're right on Poplar Avenue. So here comes 10 police guys trying to get him in a paddy wagon to bring him to jail for attempted murder or whatever they had. And he beat those. He's so tough, man. He beat the fuck out of these guys, and nobody would testify against him, and that was the end of that. And that's how tough Baseball Jim was, you know. So
Wow.
there you go.
Joe Dick, Baseball Jim.
Well, you can't get those.
I'm telling you, Briar Hill, them guys in Briar Hill had some great nicknames.
My grandpa was just Chick. You know, my grandpa was tame compared to yours. You know, he worked in the steel mills, but they just called him Chick because my last name's Chickatelli. But he was a lot easier going than your grandpa's. Jesus.
Names like I don't know what the names were, like Padanel in Italian. I have no idea what that means. Padanel, and hey, there's a Padanel, and I'm going. I call him that because everybody else did. I have no idea what it meant. And but Joe Dick, boy, he didn't like me as much as like Sandy and Billy and Joey did. He didn't like anybody. So that was an honor if he didn't like you, you know. Joe Dick.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Jimmy. We're going to wrap it up today. Listen, for all the audience out there, if you have a question that you want to submit to Jimmy, send it to us at amazingpodco@gmail.com. So for right now, it's amazingpodco. That's amazingpodco@gmail.com, and send in your questions, and we'll read them on the air next for another episode, and go down memory lane again. But we're going to continue to do this up to the show. Again, there's so many stories out of this book to explore. I'm sure there's stuff that wasn't written in the book as well that we can get to. So, we're looking forward to it, guys. Can't wait till we start talking about, what was Frank Sinatra like. I've heard some stories. You talk about Joe Dick. I've heard some stories about Sinatra.
I got stories about Sinatra, Barbra Streisand, Elvis, backstage thing. I never went to see that movie. People ask me, did you go see the movie Elvis? I said, no. I said, no, I'm not going to see that phony crap. I mean, they made out the Colonel to be a monster. He wasn't a monster like they made him out to be. I don't have any urge to see phoniness, a Hollywood BS, But if I may add, Jimmy will like this. I named my son James Nicholas Mulidore, and he in turn named his son James Mulidore. So we carried on the tradition of the Mulidore name, and it'll never go away. And Now we got a new little guy named David Mulidore that is just like my grandfather, me, my son. He's a pain in the ass, and I love him madly. So, it goes on and on.
All right. So we'll again, we're going to continue to do the show. We'll do one every week, and you can send in your comments, your questions. We'll read them on the air. We're also going to try to book some guests, some of the people that have Jimmy's come across in his long legendary life and career. Maybe some celebrities along the way. So stay tuned, everybody. The Vegas Player and the Vegas Player podcast. So until next time, this is Johnny Ciccatelli, Jimmy Naples, of course, Jimmy Mulidore. We'll see you later.
That was an amazing podcast from an amazing podcast company. For more, subscribe to our channel at youtube.com/amazingpodcastcompany.